This week in lab, we're going to spend our time practicing for the distance refraction proficiency. On the day of the proficiency, please come dressed in clinic attire. You will be assigned to do your proficiency either during the first half of your regularly scheduled lab time or during the second half of your lab time. So those schedules will go up at least an hour before your proficiency is scheduled. You'll be able to see at what time we expect you to be there. Please come with your laptops ready to record, like I said, in clinic attire, and be there about 10 minutes before your scheduled start time. You're aware of all the resources available to you. You can review the distance refraction videos. The lab and lecture supplement has a lot of information if you have questions about how things are done. And I really recommend going through the distance proficiency rubric, looking at exactly how we're going to be grading you, and that should answer a lot of questions you might have. I'm also creating a document with all the good questions that you've been asking during lab and over emails, and I'm posting that up on Moodle for you to read through. So when you do come up with a new question, please take a look at that document. Your question may have already been answered. During the proficiency, we will have the room illumination set fairly dim to enable you to do retinoscopy easily. Because you won't have access to the lights during your proficiency, you will have to verbalize whenever you are changing the lighting. So my recommendation is that when you turn on that red-green screen, the background that you have during retinoscopy and bichrome, whenever you turn it on, you verbalize that you're turning the room illumination to dim. And then when you remove that illumination or remove that red-green screen, you verbalize that you're returning the room to standard illumination. And that way you won't ever forget to verbalize. So just think about the verbalizing the room illumination tied to when you put up the red-green screen for retinoscopy and when you remove it. And then again, when you put it up for bichrome and when you remove it. Retinoscopy really should be a fast procedure. So you are going to try and make big, quick changes. Try to bracket your results instead of worrying about finding the exact perfect neutral. If you go quickly and bracket your results, you should have a fairly accurate retinoscopy. Remember that we as graders are going to be checking your retinoscopy during the proficiency. That will hopefully take us less than a minute, but you do need to account for that time in your preparations, that it will take us 30 to 60 seconds to step in, check your retinoscopy, and then let you continue. The sphere windows will be covered, so you won't be able to see the value in the sphere while you're doing retinoscopy. Once you've completed retinoscopy, you can go ahead and remove the covers and record your values. Once you've removed those or checked VAs, you will not be able to repeat retinoscopy for points. When you do your 20/40 blurs, you can add plus to both eyes at the same time as long as one eye is occluded. Once your patient has a sustained blur, go ahead and add those 2 extra clicks of plus to just the open eye and get a recovery on that 20/40 blur to when they can just see 1 or 2 letters. And then go ahead and switch eyes. If the patient confirms that it is a sustained blur, you can do the same thing, add 2 clicks of plus and find a recovery. If it is not a sustained blur, go ahead and add a little more plus until you do get that confirmed sustained blur. Then add your 2 extra clicks and find a recovery by taking away that plus. If there's not a lot of change in your spherical refinement between bichrome and MSBVA, you can put the same value for your third 20/40 blur in as you had for your second 20/40 blur. So if you do want to bring a post-it to the proficiency just to jot down that 20/40 blur and reuse the same value, you can do that. You will not be required to enter your 20/40 blur values into Epic during the proficiency. You still can if that's convenient for you, but if you prefer to just remember it or have it down on a post-it, you can do it that way. If you've chosen to put in the same 2040 blur that you had in before MSBVA, then when you put that 2040 blur in, just confirm that the patient can only see 1 or 2 letters on that 2040 line with each eye separately. For the proficiency, you will be required to use bichrome as a test for your first spherical refinement. If you move into bichrome and the patient finds the chart too blurry to identify whether the red side or the green side is clearer, go ahead and add a click of minus, and at that point the patient should respond with the expected result of the red side being clearer to start with. If your patient turns out to be a poor responder on the bichrome test, and by that I mean that they respond with 3 equals during that test, when they say the third equal, you can go ahead and switch to doing the MSBVA test instead. Verbalize that your patient is a poor responder to this test and go ahead and switch to the MSBVA. And then when you go to the second eye, assuming that this happened on the first eye that you were testing with the patient, you can move directly into the MSBVA instead of attempting the bichrome again. Remember to leave the first green or a slightly over minus response from the bichrome test when moving into the JCC test. This will allow your patient to see things more clearly and respond more easily to the JCC. I believe everyone is comfortable using an isolated 2040 line of letters for the target during JCC. I just wanted you to be aware that there were a couple of other acceptable targets that work well for JCC as well. If you're comfortable with JCC, you'll often find that you do not have to flip back to the choice 1 that the patient made. You can respond to their choice without actually having to flip back the lens to choice 1. That can save you a little bit of time and just make things go more smoothly. I also want to mention if the patient has a very small amount of cyl, then don't spend your time struggling to find the exact axis to 1 or 2 degrees. If you are within 5 or 6 degrees of that patient's axis, that's going to be good enough. Some people in lab were struggling with what to do if you only found a quarter diopter of cyl during retinoscopy. If you're doing your first power check with that quarter diopter of cyl that you found in retinoscopy and the patient chooses red, so they want more power, you're going to start adding power and continue on with your power check. If, however, you have that quarter diopter of cyl that you found during retinoscopy and the patient rejects it or chooses white when the power is aligned on your first power check, you are going to go ahead and do a cyl search to see if your patient will accept a quarter diopter of cyl or more in any other meridian. And then once you have completed your cyl search, either you will have a meridian where your patient chose to take more power, so you'll have more power in place to do an axis refinement, or your patient will have rejected that quarter diopter of cyl in all 4 principal meridians, and you'll remove it from the phoropter and continue on with your spherical refinements. After JCC, you'll put in your second 2040 blur and then clear up the vision again for your patient. Get them to the point where they can see 1 or 2 letters on that 2020 line, and then go ahead with your forced choice. After MSBVA, you'll put in your third 2040 blur, and remember you can use the same 2040 blur values that you used for your second one, and go ahead and use Prism to dissociate the images that the patient sees with each eye. From this point on, your patient will have both their eyes open. Once you've completed DE, your patient should have fairly equal vision with both eyes. At that point, you're going to remove the prism in front of the patient, and please verbally confirm that the patient just sees 1 target, and then you're going to continue to do your BSBVA while maintaining the aniso that you found during DE and moving the lenses in front of the patient's eyes together. So you have to move them simultaneously and maintain that aniso that you found in DE. That should also be the aniso that you find between the patient's eyes at the end of the BSBVA. Please practice recording directly into Epic. Time yourself as you practice. I realize right now it might seem like your sequences are taking a long time, but you will reach a point as you're practicing where you really start to speed up. You do not need to record any of the 2040 blurs in Epic during the proficiency. You can if that's convenient for you. You may also bring a Post-it if you like and jot down the 2040 blurs if you want, especially if you want to jot down that second one, then you can easily use those values to put in for the third 2040 blur. Make sure you know where the copy and duplicate buttons are and how to use them. That will help speed up your recording as you go. I'm sure you're going to be practicing on many people during the week before the proficiency. Just make sure that you do complete 4 patients specifically for the assignment. Good luck and happy practicing.